Today, let's look at 5 signs that indicate you may be carrying a narcissistic wound. When we're growing up and if we're raised by parents where our needs aren't really taken into account, the focus is more on the parents and their lives, you don't really matter on some level and you feel that. A lot of manipulative power plays have been heaped on you. You're being used and taken advantage of by your own parents. That's very, very confusing. Now, if you've been raised by narcissistic parents, perhaps they gave you a lot of attention that you didn't need. They put you on a pedestal. You had to be inauthentic for them. You were neglected in a way during childhood. You may be feeling like you're getting attention, but actually it's a sign of neglect, or you could be out and out abused. Narcissistic parents often have very unrealistic expectations of their child. Being raised by a narcissistic parent or parents can affect us the rest of our lives. And today let's look at 5 ways that this may impact us. So sign number 1 that you're carrying a narcissistic wound is you feel like you've never grown up. Now this can be because you were kept small, parentified in a way. By not honoring a child's feelings, then they don't feel worthwhile, right? And so they always feel like the little kid inside. Now this can even happen with kids who are the eldest of several children and had to take on a lot of responsibility and maybe started working 2 jobs at the age of 13. So it's not about the externals in that way so much. It's more about the inner feeling, how you relate to the world as you grow up if you feel like a little kid inside. So then this permeates into our job situation, our relationships, our friendships, and so on, because we're carrying the wound of please, I just want to be here and make things okay for you. I just want to please you. What can I do to help? You're there to soothe things over because that's how you were trained as a child. But in adult life, that's not going to be helpful, right? So if you're 45 years old, but you feel like you relate to the world like a 17-year-old, then that's carrying a narcissistic wound. Another sign, sign number 2, is being easily embarrassed in public, in view of others. Now this embarrassment can tap into the shame we have about ourselves because we were taught on so many levels that we really are worthless. And so we get used to hiding pretty good, putting on an act. We'd rather be the wallflower. We don't really want to be seen. And so then when we're of adult age and we're out in the world and we're living our lives, perhaps we're called out on something. This could be at the job. The narcissistic wound may imply that we don't know what it's like to have adult conversations. We've had little practice in sharing our authentic opinion, then we may not know what it's like to carry ourselves like an adult, advocate for ourselves when necessary, have healthy boundaries. And so because that's all been thwarted, depending on what's happening in public, we can get embarrassed easily. We don't want people to know that, to see that. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know what to do. We're full of shame, which plays out in terms of embarrassment. And in the public, there's a spotlight there, right? There's other people watching. We're used to hiding. We don't like being in the spotlight. Because after all, which leads to number 3, I may not be able to control my emotions. That's a narcissistic wound. I'm scared of my own feelings. I have volcanic rage sometimes and I just want to kill somebody and I don't know what to do with that. That's because feelings weren't tolerated. You weren't helped with feeling your feelings when you were little because the parents made it be about their feelings, not about your feelings. So you weren't able to process and work through your feelings, learn that you can just simply tolerate them. They're not going to kill you after all. They're just feelings. And safely express them. So because none of that happened because you were raised by a narcissist, then it's quite common when we're older, we don't know what to do with our feelings. Perhaps we can't even name our feelings. So if we're challenged, if somebody's in our face about something, if a boyfriend or girlfriend breaks up with us, we may go from 0 to 100 like this with our emotions. We haven't had the practice of the pacing and the talking and the healthy communication that goes along with sharing authentic emotions. So because a child's become so good at keeping everything in, well, when they're in their 20s or 30s or 40s, they may be triggered somewhere, some social setting, at a job, with your significant other, and you're amazed at the strong reaction that you're having. It can make you afraid, want to push feelings away even more, which is never going to work or be healthy. And then that's a sign of a narcissistic wound. Number 4, you may have a tendency to want to do everything properly or perfectly. There was no gray area growing up, right? You had to be in performance mode all the time, anticipating the parental needs, which didn't leave any room for you. And so a coping mechanism quite commonly is to say to ourselves, well, when I do something, I'm going to do it perfectly. I've got to show that I matter. I've got to make my point my own way. Nobody seems to want to listen to me. There must be something wrong with me maybe. So I'm going to compensate for that by doing everything in a set way. Could be a little OCD-ish even, but certainly perfect. Things have to come across a certain way. I need to say it just right. I need to look just right. I need to act like I have my act together when inside I don't have it together at all, but I don't want anybody to know that because you couldn't show your authentic self to your parents growing up. So you got really good at putting on a role, playing a role. And so when we're raised like that, that may play out in terms of things have to be done a proper way, which can be associated with perfectionism. And again, with obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD-ish kind of traits, it shows the rigidity in how the child had to maneuver through their childhood. It's very sad, but that's the reality of it. There was no room for them to just be who they authentically are. So they kind of had to put themselves in a box, right, and be perfect. If you're trying to do that, that may lead to bullet points of things you have to do or not do, or do it this way, or even if I show an authentic emotion, I want to show it this way. There's a pre-plan for it because that was learned in childhood. So that can lend itself to obsessive compulsive behavior. And lastly, you're just always on edge. You can never just really settle and kind of enjoy life. Even when things are going good in most of your external life, there's something you're still looking around for. Something's going to happen. Well, that's because you had to live that way when you were a kid. You were always in anticipatory mode. Perhaps your narcissistic dad was going to come in and yell at you. Perhaps your narcissistic mother was going to come and tell you what you're doing wrong, why you look horrible right now. So you always had to be on and ready. Well, without therapeutic work, that will likely continue into adulthood, and we're always feeling like there's an element of fear, big ball of anxiety right behind us, looming right near us, or even in us. And so we wonder, even when we're on vacation for a month, out camping, getting away from it all, still there's an inner churning. And inner anxiety, it never seems to go away. Maybe it's become so normalized, it's there so much that you don't even know it's there. That's a common way that this can play out. If you feel you're on edge most of the time, it may be because you're carrying a narcissistic wound. So I hope this has been helpful for some of you in dealing with the fact that you're injured by being raised by narcissistic parents or a caregiver. I'd love to hear any comments you may have. Feel free to leave them in the comment section about this topic. Please subscribe to my mental health YouTube channel if you like these kind of videos. And until next week, this is Brad Shore signing off from Ask a Shrink.